In 1821, a community of faith put into action a vision for a new place of worship. This was even before there was a city of Anderson, and they gave birth to a legacy of love and purpose that continues until this day. Early baptisms were in the Rocky River, and as the church grew and ministered to the surrounding community, it was led by people who, like Jesus, started a church not to be served, but to serve, and to use their gifts and talents for the benefits of others. This mission has continued over the next 2 centuries. First Baptist has planted seeds of ministry across Anderson County and helped give birth to many other church fellowships which still gather each Sunday. And the legacy continues today, as witnessed by ministries that still help define this church, from the Baraka Sunday School class to youth and children's programs, from Saturday servants to the Will Mary. The focus on service and ministry remains at the heart of First Baptist Church. In uncertain times, when it is tempting to dig in the heels, circle the wagons, or expend energy attempting to reclaim something that was lost or some bygone era, First Baptist Church has chosen a different path and will continue to embrace current and future challenges, letting light in with a vision and with seeds of imagination which lead to the building of the new things God has in store. After 200 years, First Baptist Church remains committed to this legacy of love and purpose, not only to our church family, but to our community.
Well, my first memory is that I was just about 4 years old, maybe younger than that. My mother brought me to Sunday school classes down here, and then they wanted me to sing up there every once in a while. And Mrs. Kelly and Mrs. Ruth White, and also another lady that we had, and I wouldn't sing or I wouldn't do anything until they decided that they're going to give me an extra cookie or something they had up there.
How long have you been a part of First Baptist Church?
Since I was 18 years old, 71 years. I've seen a lot of changes. I've been in the choir 31 years. When Doyle died, I joined the choir.
I came in 1971, the summer of 71, and to work with School District 5 at the time. And we found First Baptist Church, and we found a home. It was probably one of the most comfortable places I've ever gone to worship, because I found not just a place to worship, I found people you enjoy worshiping with. And we found uncles and aunts that we didn't know we had, and brothers and sisters we didn't know we had. So the people of this church were just very warm. The church was very solid in its foundation, and things were just moving very, very well. We felt very comfortable at Anderson.
We came to First Baptist Church in 1973, and we moved to Anderson, and we were looking for a church that had a good youth ministry. And that's the reason we joined First Baptist Church. They had a good youth and children's ministry. And we were looking for something for our boys, Greg and Jeff, because we wanted them to have something that would enrich their lives. And that's when we joined the church. The Sunday that we were going to join, as we had already met Jim Crane and some of the staff, Jim Crane was walking down the sidewalk, and our little Jeff was running up the street, and he started pulling on his coat, and he said, "Yes, son," he said, "we're going to join, preacher, we're going to join everything you got at this church." And we did.
Back, I taught several different classes from time to time. Judge King's 43 years is not exactly a typical assignment for a Sunday school class. And I've also been called on from time to time to help with funerals, and that has meant a great deal to me to get on that basis with a family at the time of their grief. Well, my biggest single memory is working with the Baraka class. The Baraka class came on the air 87 years ago, and I was born 4 months after it went on the air, but I'm not going to tell you how old I am. Well, the fact of longevity, I think, is part of it. A lot of people listen to the Baraka class. Just all along, we get feedback from people who listen to us. I have a number of people who tell me that they listen to me on the way to their 11 o'clock church service, and that's good to know. I remember going to a funeral out in I guess maybe the Whitefield community years ago. I wasn't in charge of the funeral, but after the service, I was standing talking with somebody, and I noticed across the way these two women kept looking at us. And after a while, she came over and said, "Are you Lawrence Webb?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." I thought maybe I had preached in her church sometime. But she said, "I recognize your voice. I listen to Baraka." So we have a lot of faithful listeners.
Well, the Baraka class meant a lot to a lot of us. And I just started up, and D. Fred Stevens kind of ran the Baraka class for a while, and he said who was going to be where. And so but the Baraka class was flat full, and then Mr. Wynn and Mr. Harper and several of them back there being secretaries to the Baraka class. And honestly, they've been on the radio now ever since that started, because WAIM and Wilson Hall put it all here.
I tell you, as a boy, two funny stories, but I mean, you're a boy, you don't know any better. Well, I went to the haunted church, and if anybody wants to know what I'm talking about, look at the sanctuary before we demolished and built this one. It was kind of Gothic, just dark, just spooky, cupolas and these, outcroppings. So it was like haunted. But I went, my mom and daddy brought me, because it looked like a scary castle. This was as a little boy. And the one sanctuary right before we built the one we have now. And then Greg, you well remember Pastor Crane. Well, he was the very, very first pastor that I would recognize, know, because I was maybe, 8 years of age, 10 years of age. Well, in my mind, I thought he was the president. And I guess it was because my grandmama and granddaddy, Edith and E.B. Drew, would just talk about him during the week, and full respect and busy and running the church. So he must be the president. And it was a long time before I figured out, because, I couldn't figure the part about how he could be president and pastor my church.
Is that we met the people who preceded us and learned to appreciate how much they loved this church and how much they supported this church. They believed in this fellowship. Then I think about the people like Pete Burris. He was a solid, there all the time, here to take care of whatever needed to do, but he never got in the limelight, and he never tried to be a part of the show. He was always supportive of what was going on. We had some solid other rock persons that just were here, and their faithfulness meant so much to this fellowship. J. Walter Sanders might be another person you remember quite well. What would we have done without J. Walters to run the audio-visual scene and so forth? Henry Wallace, also very much involved in that type of process. It just amazed me how much time and talent they gave to this church because they loved this church.
The spring before I graduated from seminary, Dr. Court Flint The pastor here at that time came to my church in Fort Worth, Texas to preach a revival. And we got acquainted. He found out I was about to graduate, wanted to be a youth minister. They were looking for a youth minister. So I think about a month later, I flew over here. The rest was history. I was here for right at 3 years. I was in the ministry 39 years and always served as youth or associate pastor, never was the senior pastor. And I retired in 2003. I came up here to assist in a funeral. And Ann Self, principal at Calhoun School, who had been one of my little ones when I was here before, met my wife for the first time, found out she was a school speech therapist, and offered her a job right on the spot. So the next fall, we came back and been here 17 years now. I was in the choir. When we came back, I was in the choir for 13 years. Sat by your father many, many times. I've been involved as a family minister. In this church, you don't have to be a deacon to do that. You have a group of families that you visit and watch out for, and special needs, contact them and that kind of thing. I taught Bible study at the Will Mary for probably 10 years at least. That was a real blessing. I was president of the Baraka class for about 5 years. Still do the family ministry part, but that's about it for me right now since I'm 82 years old.
It wasn't but a few months when I got here that I was asked to take charge of the senior youth program and Sunday school, and so we, with Lolita Peeler's help, and so we had about 100 kids, and what a program we had, and it was really, really blessing to me to work with all those young people all those years. And then as time went on, I joined the choir, and my husband did too, and then several years later, I kind of had a burden for the ladies that didn't have a Sunday school class. And I prayed about it, and I thought, well, I don't know if I can do this or not. And I talked to several of them. So I went to the staff and talked to them about it, and they thought it was a really good idea. So we decided to make the announcement that we would start a ladies' Sunday school class any age, for any reason they needed a Sunday school class, that we would be there for them. And the first Sunday, we had 8 people. And we have grown since then, and we minister each other, we love each other, we take care of each other. And it's been such a blessing for me to be allowed to do that.
Our church, we'd been looking at the Will Mary across the street, 8-story apartment building, just for anyone to rent and stay at. And it was getting rough as a building. The occupants, not all that desirable with their habits and goings-ons, and there they were adjacent to the church. So Mr. Chuck Welburn in our congregation got the notion, you know, with the number of seniors we have and with the ministries we have of all age groups here in the congregation, our church could actually take that on and then have it available to senior citizens on a fixed income. And so May of 1986 is when that took place. But in October of '86, the board approached me to manage it. And so I'd already been, you know, in the rental property game and already had some rental houses of myself. And so I went and toured it, talked to some residents. We had some church people living there. And I said, this is going to really, really work. It's going to be a nice, nice place. And we have sweet people living across the street that may not have any family whatsoever. Only a third of them even own an automobile. but it gives them a quiet place, a safe place like I've mentioned, and then now a place to congregate, meet. Bingo is offered, Will Mary Bible studies, of course Meals on Wheels makes deliveries there.
I have served in many capacities. I've served early on as chairman of the deacons on 2 occasions, and then taught Sunday school for over 35 years, and then also was involved in the finance and so forth of our church, and just tried to be a part of what we're trying to accomplish here.
Every day it is a blessing just to walk in the doors and sit down. You know, you feel God's presence. I hope, I do. And then when you sing His praises. And then you listen for the message and you try to follow the commandments and do what the sermon is saying do each week, or do you do it?
My hope is that the excitement of this anniversary and us being able to get back in church now after having been out for a year or so, that this will be kind of a shot in the arm and give us some new life, and we'll be seeing some new people come in to help keep this ministry going for a lot longer.
You know, with COVID, we had to just close down the church. And I knew I would miss that, right? But I didn't know it would affect me, and it did. And I would just be at a loss. You know, it was missing in my life. And so we would attempt to, you know, have a gathering, maybe away from the church, maybe outdoors, right? And so what's always kept me here, I just love my Sunday school. The Agape class for married couples, they're just sweet people, caring people. And I always want to see them, be with them, meet with them, have socials. And then I'm in the sanctuary choir. And that is one given group. And they show a love. And then with Adrian directing us, we're all one in that one. And that's where my heart is the choir and the Sunday school. And so by being in the congregation and the church and having Josh as the pastor, I can be here, share that love, contribute, and then look for ways to grow within the Lord.
My desire for this church is that we will continue to show that this is a place where people can feel like there's a place and a purpose, that people are loved in this fellowship, and that people care about one another in this fellowship.
Hello friends, First Baptist Anderson. It's hard to imagine it's 34 years since I first came to be your pastor. We had some good times together. It's been a while now. My health is not what it was. I hope you have a wonderful celebration.
Hello friends, we miss you and hope you have a great time today.
And I felt a strong sense of call to come here. But my oldest child was entering 9th grade. My middle child was entering junior high. And my youngest child was entering kindergarten. So this church embraced our family. We were overwhelmed with love and support as we came. I think the first 2 months we were here, Pam didn't prepare a meal. Sunday school classes and mission groups and the choir and others, they brought meals to the house, and about every other meal had a strawberry cake from the sweetery. I put on a lot of weight in those days. After about a year here, I had to go on a real a crash diet. And as I tried to identify what would be this church's unique role, the one thing that I heard from them and saw in them was a desire to serve this community, was a desire to take care of the least of these. You know, 3 of our pastors have served in one role or another as president of Anderson College. often in an interim capacity, but sometimes actually as president. Of course, Annie Dove Denmark and her role with the college, basically keeping that college afloat, and for 25 years she served, and that's a remarkable story in and of itself. William Bullen Johnson, who came here to start the Johnson Female Seminary, first president of the Southern Baptist Convention, buried out here in our cemetery. When I talk about the history of this church,
I think Josh has got the prospects of bringing this church back better than anybody I know.
We are unbelievably blessed. When we came, Jim Crane was in the pastorate of this church, and Jim was just an unusual pastor in and of itself. Then Jim Thomason came, and Jim has just been indeed, was a blessing for 25 years. And Josh, he's just the icing on the cake. I have never felt any more closer to God than in the fellowship of Josh when he's speaking and when he's thinking and when he's preaching. You just feel an overwhelming sense that he cares about the people that sit in these pews.
The ministers, of all the ministers that we've had in this church, and they've been a blessing to us, and Josh is such a blessing in this church. When Jim died, Jim was in he and Sasha's Sunday school class, and that class meant so much to him, and he really enjoyed it. And when he died, they were there for me. Josh was right there for me for every need that I had. And I just want to thank him for that. And I really appreciate his ministry and how he pastors and reaches out to us when we're in need, and all the many good things that he does and the many sermons he brings and the love he shows to this church and the people. I really appreciate that and love you, Josh.
He probably has a little sweeter temperament than I do, because he's a little younger. I think I was a little sweeter when I was younger, but I finally realized that, when you serve the church, you serve a lot of salt of the earth people. And then there are the other folks. I think Josh has a good sense of that. And I admire him greatly. He's sharp. He knows his scripture. He knows how to apply it. I enjoy hearing him teach and preach. I enjoy who he is personally. Got a smile and a laugh that will light up a room. Very pastoral when that's what's called for. Good guy. He's the real deal.
I've been reflecting a lot lately on what the benefit is of marking an occasion like this. What does it mean for us spiritually? What does it mean for us as a congregation? And I think there are several levels of importance that cause us to gather today, cause us to celebrate this milestone today. I think first and foremost, we realize that God has been extremely faithful to our church. He's helped sustain us through everything that 200 years of existence brings to any institution. And we can look at the broader context of our country over the past 200 years and imagine how those influences resonated here in this church. Good things and bad things, monumental cultural shifts. And this church is here still telling its story. And I think that's a testament to God. And so we draw strength from that and faith from that as we remember that story and our story. I think we also remember that we stand on the shoulders of a lot of people, thousands and thousands of people over 200 years, whose names, by and large, we will never know. There are some names we'll recognize, and we see those names in our written history, but there are many nameless people across the generations who gave so much of themselves to this place. And so we stand on their shoulders and we receive an inheritance from them. And then I think about how it affects us as individuals, this history, remembering this history. Everything in this room, I think, serves to remind us that we're a part of something bigger than ourselves. There's a story that we're a part of that's bigger than us, but we're a part of it. We're invited to be a part of that story. We're invited to contribute to that story, which is a huge statement that we're not just recipients of a story that we share, but we're called to participate in that story. We're called to not just receive this inheritance, we're called to contribute to this ministry called First Baptist Church. And so I think we celebrate the fact that we get to be a part of the story of this church, and in some small way, we get to leave our mark on the story of this ministry called First Baptist Church. And it affects all of us personally. We're here today celebrating this because this story has touched our lives and has made a difference. This story of First Baptist Church is not yet complete, and we're still writing that story. And I think remembering who we have been and who has helped make us who we have been gives us a bit of perspective, so that we're doing our best for the people who will follow after us, who will call us their spiritual ancestors. And though they may not know our names, we'll recognize that we have helped make this place what it is. As we think about this history, we are left with feelings of gratitude and joy, and we celebrate the rich history of this place and the difference that it has not only made in this community, but it's a personal testimony for each one of us who are here today. This church has affected us and impacted us in a positive way. I'm humbled by the rich contributions of the people that are even in these pews this morning, who've helped make this a place that's been a blessing to me and to my family. My experience here, my family moved here in 2012. My wife and I are miles and miles away from our families, our biological families. And my testimony about my experience at this church is that this church has become family to us. We have surrogate parents and surrogate grandparents, and our children who are hours away from their grandparents have surrogate grandparents and people who adore them and love them and pour themselves into them. And we see our children growing up in this kind of environment and themselves embodying some of the wonderful things that we see in this church. And it's very humbling. And we struggle to convey our gratitude for that.